Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first podcast that I'm doing solo and pre-recorded, just something I'm trying out. And we're calling it the HojCast, because that just kind of makes me smile on the inside. And so what I want this podcast to be, I already have another podcast, Beating a Dead Horse, but I wanted to do this podcast, something a little bit more thought out, each episode, for one thing, because Beating a Dead Horse is more kind of stream of consciousness, and I have a co-host. But I wanted to do one that would focus primarily on gaming. Beating a Dead Horse typically tends to talk a lot about movies, a lot about TV, and only briefly about games. Because of my co-host, I don't want to bore him with games. And so I wanted to do something that would maybe be gaming specific. So that brings us to the HojCast, where today I'm going to be talking about mobile gaming. And so hopefully this will be good. Hopefully you like this. If you do, we'll talk about what you do later, but let's get into this. So the first thing I want to talk about when I talk about mobile gaming is sort of the thing that I grew up with, which was the Game Boy. Also the Game Gear to a lesser extent, but I did grow up in that age of handheld gaming, right? I think I can remember very vividly being a child and playing Pokemon at recess instead of doing recessy things. And man, it was just such a interesting time. I mean, up to that point, if I wanted to play games, I had to go to my house or go to a friend's house that had a console. I had to plug in a game there. You're tethered to it. It's isolated to one room and one television, and really it just exists in this very specific space. But when I got my first Game Boy, which actually, I missed the first Game Boy and landed with a Game Boy Pocket was my first Game Boy. So it was even more portable than the original Game Boy had been. But I remember getting one of those and just kind of it blew my mind that I could play games somewhere that's not home. Now those games were nothing like the games that I played at home. They were, in some ways, because my original, I think my first big foray into mobile gaming was probably Pokemon. And Pokemon honestly played differently than any game that I would play at home. Many of the games I played at home were very short and sweet. Not just like Super Mario, for example. Not a short and sweet game. Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. It's not short. But it is, it's definitely a long game, but you could pick it up for small amounts of time. It was just a very different feel, right? Than something like Pokemon, like an RPG. And I really wasn't an RPG gamer until then, right? But man, I just remember being so blown away that I could play games anywhere. When we went on family trips or in a car, I don't have to read anymore. I can play a game. And it was so cool. And that system, the Game Boy, obviously been through very, very many iterations, very different, growth points, I think, in the system that are very different. But still kept that main idea of playing games somewhere that's not at home. Now what's been cool and for me in recent years with the advent of the 3DS is that many of those console experiences I get to play outside of the console world. So for example, Ocarina of Time, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, one of my favorite games of all time. And I can play that, in the palm of my hand, on a console that is arguably smaller than the controller that I played it on originally, if that makes any sense. So cool. I loved it. I loved the 3D remake of Ocarina of Time. I tell people all the time, for me, as a Zelda fan, it is the quintessential, experience of that game. I think it is the best one. There are problems, I think, with the N64 version that mostly come from the fact that it's old. It's an older system. There were hardware restrictions. The 3DS just made better use, I think, of everything because it's newer and it can make it look better. I think it's the best version. Some people may disagree with me. And a game that I had not played a lot of as a kid, but I did own because I was a Zelda fan, was Majora's Mask. And so recently, they released a version of Majora's Mask for the 3DS, and they coupled it with the release of a Majora's Mask 3DS, the new 3DS XL, which a lot of people are kind of, I don't know, people are mad about the new 3DS. Having played one, I actually own one, we're going to talk about that in a minute, but it is a good upgrade. Now, it could be argued that the upgrade is sort of the expansion pack of its day. If you remember back to the N64, they built a new thing. It wasn't a new system, but it was a new piece that you had to put in your N64. They released it, I believe, with Donkey Kong 64, and it was the thing that you didn't have to have for all things, but you needed it for some things. Some games needed it, the extra power that it gave. I would argue that the new 3DS is a little bit different than that, I think. I do enjoy mine. The C-Stick that they added is a good addition. I will say, though, I don't find myself using the C-Stick as much as I thought I would, even having played a lot of Majora's Mask. It's come in handy for times where I need to see things high up or in weird spots, that, you couldn't just get by pressing the L button, which you remember that's kind of how you used to do it back in the day. It might have been Z back then, but that's your L on the 3DS. But I find myself hitting that button quite a bit to resituate the camera behind me. But at times, the C-Stick has been very helpful. I think more than anything, the 3D effect is much, 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 much better with the new 3DS. So if you didn't like the 3D in the original iterations of the console, I don't blame you. I found myself playing with 3D off most of the time. But the new 3D effect is really well done, and I think anyone who didn't like it before should probably try it again just to see. I've actually found myself playing with it about half and half. My eyes don't tire out like they did with the original. And it's a better 3D effect. If you don't know, it tracks your head and movement and blah, blah, blah. It's very good. Very well done. And it adds a layer to a game like Majora's Mask that I think is very helpful. One thing I want to talk about. So I told you I have a new 3DS. The new 3DS XL, which is a horrible naming thing, which, I mean, if at this point, if we know nothing about Nintendo, it's that they don't know how to name things. So that's not super surprising. It's going to cause a lot of headaches for a lot of parents around Christmas time, but luckily, maybe most people will have them by then. Man, it's a horrible naming. I mean, I get it. It's the same system. It's just a newer version of it. But man, I don't know who does naming at Nintendo, but they probably shouldn't have a job anymore because I feel like they've bungled this a couple of times. The Wii U was a bad name for a console. I agree. I think so. And I think the new 3DS is no different. It's a bad way to name the console, but I don't know what else you do to it other than call it like the 3DS 2 or something, which I think would have probably been better, but still not really great because it plays the original games. I think that was what's so great about the old, so you had the Game Boy was one thing, right? Then you made a smaller one. Well, what do we call it? We call it the Game Boy Pocket. Then we have one that has color, so we name it the Game Boy Color. So, I mean, if anything, it could have been like an Apple sort of thing. It could have been the 3DS-C. I don't know. Maybe that sounds dumb, but whatever. So, I told you I have one. The one I have is actually the Majora's Mask 3DS that came out. Now, it's a fun story of how I got it. Basically, I work at a GameStop off and on, or did over the holidays, and I saw they were coming out. I had just started a new job, though, so I wasn't at GameStop the day they were announced, right? So I called my GameStop that I worked at and said, hey, or no, I didn't call him. I called my manager and said, hey, are you working today? When do they go on sale? Blah, blah, blah. She said, well, they're on sale now, but you should call now, the store. So I go to call the store, and as I'm dialing, I get a text that says, we're out. So that was a bummer. But I told them, if we ever get any more, let me know. I really want one. But I went ahead and pre-ordered the black new 3DS XL because I knew I wanted it. And I got a call a couple weeks later saying that GameStop was going to redo some. And so I got mine. That, however, not been the case for a lot of people. I've been looking at the internet, and so many people either had consoles, ordered and aren't getting them, or were shut down really quick. I know the big one that everyone's been mad at is Best Buy. Basically what happened is, as with all of these things, someone bought up a bunch of them. So someone got in right as they started selling, bought, 5, 10 of them, and with the idea to sell them, which is what happens. And so what happened is Best Buy started selling, realized they sold too many. So they started canceling orders of people who had multiples. They would cancel if someone had 5, they'd pull it down to 1. They could only get 1. Well, the problem is the system somewhere messed up, and so people that only had one were getting theirs canceled. And then there were some that were saying they were gonna ship, and they had a date, and da-da-da, and then it changed, and then they're not coming at all, and man, what that comes down to is Nintendo, Best Buy, someone there between the two, some sort of liaison between the two, didn't communicate well. Best Buy didn't know how many they were getting, or Nintendo told them they were going to send them out and then didn't. If I had to guess, I think back to in high school for me when the Wii first came out. I remember our Walmart, which is where I bought mine, told us, we know they have some coming, but we don't know how many. And that's probably about what happened. And, I mean, I just gotta say, Nintendo bungled this, and I've used that word twice in this podcast, so sorry about that. But bungle is a fun word. They messed it up, man. They dropped the ball. What happened is they announced the thing that they know is going to make a ton of money. If there has been nothing true about the 3DS, this has been true. People wanted a Majora's Mask. As soon as you give us Ocarina of Time 3D, of course people are gonna, raise their voices loud for a Majora's Mask. So Nintendo knew this was gonna be a moneymaker. They knew the 3DS was going to be a moneymaker because they've had Zelda editions of DS consoles quite often, I think, with every iteration, and they always sell well. They always sell out super fast. So, I mean, they knew all of this. I don't know if Best Buy got greedy and thought maybe we can get some more or what happened, but man, I hate it for the people that didn't get one. It's just bad. And I think, this is sort of things that the other companies did before, and they learned their lesson, but I feel like, man, do you ever feel like Nintendo just doesn't pay attention to what happens to other companies? I feel like that happens sometimes. It's like, the PS3 launched and they ran out all the time. They just couldn't find one. And so the PS4 launches, they're like, okay, that's never gonna happen again. Well, the Wii launched back in the day, and it was the same way. There were none. You couldn't find them anywhere. It was so difficult to find. And then, the Wii U came out, and I feel like the Wii U had a better launch than the Wii did. Probably just because people didn't know what the heck it was. But then, I mean, you do the same thing with the new 3DS. And it's not just the new 3DS, because there's plenty of those, but it's specifically this Majora's Mask version. So, Nintendo, get it together, man. I don't know what you're doing over there. You knew this was gonna make money. You knew this was gonna be a big deal. What happened? What happened? Why? It sucks that there are people that ordered one, paid for one, and lost one. That's awful. I hate it for you, people. And now they're going for crazy rates on eBay. The people that got multiples, they're going so expensive, and it's one of the ugly things of the gaming industry that I really hate. So stop doing that, because it really is a beautiful piece of hardware. I got a video up on my channel somewhere, and you should watch it because it is gorgeous. I'm actually probably talk about it on Beating a Dead Horse night too. I'm actually recording this the same night of Beating a Dead Horse. So you'll probably check it out there too. So that's enough about that hardware. It is gorgeous though. I want to talk a little bit about Majora's Mask, the remake, the 3D version. In the same way that Ocarina of Time is like, Ocarina of Time 3D is probably the best version of that game. I think Majora's Mask is the best version. Majora's Mask 3D is the best version of that game. Now, there haven't been as many versions of Majora's Mask. There's been a lot of Ocarina of Time. You have the original N64. There was a GameCube version that was made that had the Master Quest on it. So there's two right there. So, the original Master's Quest. I mean, there's multiple versions, and I think this is the best, that's the best one. Majora's Mask been much less of that, but if any, I don't even know if there's been any versions of that, but, it definitely is prettier. It's smoother, duh. All the reasons I like Ocarina of Time 3D better is the reasons I like Majora's Mask, better. I think the saving mechanism is better, in Majora's Mask 3D. They added more save points. It's just better designed, and it had to be. It had to be for a mobile game. It had to, because if you expect me to play it on this little screen, which means I'm probably not playing for long, extended periods of time, you have to do it that way. You have to. And they did. They did a good job of it. I think it still keeps the integrity of the original, while still being really good. And man, I don't know if it's just because I played it when I was so young, but the Bomber's Notebook makes a lot more sense to me now. It just looks, it just makes more sense. So it's a great game. So good. I'm having so much fun with it. And I'm notorious for not finishing games on my 3DS, but I'm very excited about this being one of them. It's very good. If you have a 3DS, even if you don't have the new one, if you just have a 3DS, go pick up this game. It's so good. It's one of the darker Zelda games. It's one of the more weird Zelda games. And honestly, I think probably another episode of the HojCast is going to have to be Zelda Theory, because man, that game series is so unique and cool. And I would love to just rant about that for a while. Probably, I'm gonna have to do that. I'm calling it now. We're doing a Zelda episode. That's enough about Nintendo. Obviously, not everybody has those or wants those, but one thing that we mostly do have, most of us have, is some sort of either smartphone or a tablet or an iPod Touch you may have. All of those things, playing games is a big deal, man. And one thing that's near and dear to my heart, and I don't think enough people talk about it enough, is playing games on your phone. And I'm going to talk specifically about iPhone gaming because I have an iPhone, but I've had an Android as well. And so I just understand when I say iPhone, I'm not really just speaking to iPhone. I'm talking about mobile gaming on a phone or a tablet or something to that effect, in general. And you can't talk about that without talking about microtransactions. And when you talk about microtransactions, people lose their minds and start riots in the digital internet streets, and it's just not a fun time. Here's my beef. No, I don't have beef. I don't have a beef with microtransactions if they're done right. And even when they're not done right, I understand what the people are trying to do. I don't love it, but it's a thing that's happening. Microtransactions are not going anywhere. I will say that again. Microtransactions are not going anywhere. There are always, as long as there are games now, there will be games that have microtransactions. It is up to you, the consumer, me, the consumer, to decide whether or not they're going to play a game that heavily uses microtransactions. Now, every game almost that I love on my iPhone has microtransactions. But here's the kicker. You don't have to buy them. Now, there are games that are pay to win, and those are awful, and you shouldn't play them. Unless you love them, then you should. I mean, really, when it comes to games, any game, anywhere, if you enjoy it, play it. If it's pay to win, that's not my cup of tea. But some people are into that. They're not going anywhere, we gotta deal with them. They are here to stay. But I think there are times that they're okay. Let me try to phrase this in a way that we don't really talk about too much. But I think, so for example, one of the games, I'm going to talk about games that I play in a minute, but one of the games I'm playing on my phone is called Spider-Man Unlimited. It's a endless runner, featuring Spider-Man, one of my favorite comic book characters, actually my favorite comic book character. And you run, basically. It's just endless runner, just like Temple Run and any of those games that have come before it. I think anybody that spent any time in, handheld gaming on their phone understands that there's probably about 5 types of games, and people just remake them with different skins, and that's fine. I just happen to like Spider-Man Unlimited because I happen to like Spider-Man. Well, in that game, you can purchase with real money this thing called ISO 8. And ISO 8 will help you do a lot of things, specifically open portals that give you random chances at new characters. You can also wait till there's an event where you can earn said random characters, and so you don't have to spend ISO 8. But if you wanted to, or like me, you got a gift card around Christmas time that you weren't going to use, and you spend it all on ISO 8, you don't have to feel bad about it. That's fine to me. That's mostly cosmetic, because the characters don't really do anything crazy different. I mean, they do have different power-ups and stuff, but ultimately, same thing. So, that's fine. That's fine to me. What's the problem is when you hit a paywall where it's, you can't do anything until you buy this thing. That's wrong. That is awful. It's bad game making, and I just don't play those games. And I think really that's the point. I mean, the great thing about the way the market works is if a game is awful or anything is awful, people don't have to buy it, and then it will go away. So that's my beef, or my thing on that. Real quick, I want to get into the games that I am playing. So, on my phone now, I am playing the Spider-Man Unlimited game. And I've kind of already told you about it. It is a endless runner, and it's so fun. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, so it's right up my alley. It's what's great about it, because let's be honest, we're playing these games a lot of times when we're riding in a car, hopefully not when you're driving. When you're laying in your bed at night when you can't sleep, maybe when you're watching a boring movie or something boring on television, or when we're going to the bathroom. Let's be completely honest. And so, Spider-Man for me is one of those, I can play it in those times sort of games. It doesn't take me a lot of time, I don't have to invest a lot of energy into it, and it's just something fun to do. If you want that game, it is on the Android store, I'm pretty sure, and it's on the App Store on iOS, and so you can play it, and it's so fun. It is free. Obviously has in-game transactions, but you don't have to buy those, as we've discussed already. Another game I've been playing a lot of lately, and I have no idea why, is a game called Tap Titans. And it's basically sort of an RPG, but literally all you do is tap the screen. That's how you do everything. You basically are hit with 10 monsters, or 9 monsters, and on the 10th monster, it's a boss fight. And you earn gold from that, and you earn experience from that, and you can use the gold to level up your character, and level up his attacks, and give him bonus attacks, and level up his henchmen and party, his team members that play with him. And that's all it is. That's all there is to it. You play up to level 80, and then you can prestige, and you start at the beginning and work your way up again. And there's absolutely no skill involved, really. It is tapping. But it's so addictive to me. I love it. I am now going through it. I prestiged 3 times now. I'm on my 3rd prestige, and I'm not actually, I could prestige again, but I'm not. I'm gonna keep playing farther to get some of the unlockables. Another game with in-game transactions. You can buy diamonds with real money, or you can earn diamonds, just from playing the game. So that's pretty good. I enjoy that. Well, only beef with that game is every now and then it'll put an ad, and it'll say, here's an ad. But what's good is if you watch the ad, then you earn something. Typically diamonds, or a power-up, or something, gold. And so there's a reason for the ad to be there. It actually does help you move forward. It's not just in your face annoying. So I kind of like that. And that's on the iOS store. I don't know if it's on Android. And then I wanted to talk at the end here, because it's going to be the last thing I'm going to talk about, a mobile gaming company that I love. Everything I've ever played of theirs, I'm in love with. I love their graphic style. I love their dev style. The only thing I don't love is how expensive the games are. But there's a company called Kairosoft, and I love all of their games. If you don't know who Kairosoft is, they made a game called Game Dev Story. Yep. And a bunch of other games too that are really good. Game Dev Story was my first introduction into them, and I love that game. It's very similar to Game Dev Tycoon, which actually Game Dev Tycoon is similar to Game Dev Story, if that makes sense. Game Dev Tycoon is a game on PC from a company that I can't remember the name of right now. But, Game Dev Story, made by Kairosoft for the iPhone. I think I actually originally got it on my Android. Typically Kairosoft games run at about $5 a game, which is kind of steep. And many of them have not been redone for the iPhone 6, which is a bummer. But there's like Game Dev Story. There's one with about a cruise ship. There's one where you run a school. There's one where you run a sushi restaurant. And all of them have similar feels, similar graphic styles. And they're just fun. They're just really fun. Game Dev Story is still fun for me to play, and I think it actually has been updated to iPhone 6. I might be wrong on that. But they're just fun games. And what's cool about Kairosoft too is there is light versions of their games in the App Store that you can play. I just wanted to mention them because people don't talk about them a lot. I don't hear a lot about them anymore. Because typically people are waiting on their next game. I mean, they've been promising Game Dev Story 2, which I think is out. I want to say the company is Korean. I may be totally wrong about that. But I think the game's already out in whatever Asian market. Has been for a long time, but I want to play it, and it still hasn't come to iPhone, and it makes me sad. So yeah, mobile gaming. Not just for your living room. Gaming that you can play in a car, or in your bed, or even on the toilet, which Actually, if you have a PS Vita, that gap is sort of bridged. If you know what I mean, if you want to play your PS4 on your Vita, you could do that if you wanted to. But I think, is an integral part of my gaming history, still is. And I really do think, honestly, a lot of people don't agree with me here, but I really think, iPhone gaming is where it's at, as far as, what am I doing with this piece of technology that I spent a bunch of money on, other than making phone calls and sending text messages? I am playing games. I have a 64 gig iPhone, and I would venture that many of those gigabytes are full of games. Not that I have 64 gigs. That's how much space I have. I don't have 64 gigs of games. Don't worry. But man, I definitely do love it. What are your favorite apps? If you had to pick a game on iPhone that you, or Android that you would play all the time, what is that? If you're watching on the YouTubes or listening on the YouTubes, then go ahead and comment below. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and like it on the YouTubes. And if you are listening on iTunes, thank you for listening. Don't feel afraid to leave us a rating. Help this kind of move on up the ranks. Hopefully you have enjoyed this. And if you have any ideas for things I should talk about besides the now planned Zelda episode, go ahead and send me a tweet. Me on the Twitters. I'm on the Twitters as @HojjoshMC. That's the @ HojjoshMC. And you can find me on YouTube, obviously, at youtube.com/HojjoshMC. Hopefully you guys, I can't talk, guys. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Bye!